Fast forward to 2024, and gaming has turned into a hotbed of political discourse where characters are relentlessly gender and race swapped, far leftist identities are being injected into games where it makes no sense, and people calling out this obvious interference from entities with particular agendas are being cancelled left, right, and centre. So what drove this shift from a gameplay-focused experience to politically charged narratives? Well, later on in the video, I'll share some interesting information on why things have come to their current state. But first, let's take a look at how it's gone from this to this. In the early 2000s, the financial world saw the inception of a report called Who Cares Wins. So this was an initiative led by the United Nations and supported by key financial institutions. It advocated for the inclusion of environmental, social, and governance, otherwise known as ESG, considerations into investment decisions. And the idea was straightforward. Companies focusing on sustainability and ethical practices are likely to be better long-term investments. But how does this relate to video games? So for a long time, video games have been a platform for innovation and creativity. Yet, as the industry evolved, it began to intersect with real-world issues, including sustainability, social justice, and corporate responsibility. The principles of Who Cares Wins started to influence the gaming industry, promoting developers, publishers, and players to consider the broader impact of games. By the late 2000s and early 2010s, we saw the first significant signs of ESG principles entering the gaming world. This ranged from adopting green practices in game development and operations to incorporating themes of social justice and government into gaming narratives. So in the gaming industry itself, the introduction of diverse characters and narratives has sparked wide-ranging discussions, and the gaming community has reacted in varied ways to the portrayal of diversity in video games. Some good, and of course, some bad. In Mass Effect Andromeda, for instance, BioWare aimed to broaden its universe with more diverse characters and relationships. However, the game faced criticism from players who felt the focus on diversity came at the expense of the game's depth and polish. The backlash was not necessarily about the inclusion itself, but stemmed from a perception that the narrative and gameplay suffered due to the pushing the message, which led to a rush title that supposedly was pushed out in 12 months. Was the focus on diversity the reason for its poor reception? No, likely not. However, overemphasizing being progressive by including the trans character Haley Abrams, whose identity as a trans woman was more important than her role as the colony's scientific director, certainly riled a lot of players. Not only that, the character was so poorly written to begin with that her character, by means of offering her previous, or should I say, dead name, would have actually been offensive to trans people in the first place. So that was a bit of a swing and a miss from BioWare on the inclusivity front right there and then. Then there was Battlefield 5. So Battlefield 5 brought female soldiers to the front lines of its World War II setting, which of course ignited debate over historical accuracy versus inclusivity, because this didn't happen and it makes no sense to do so. And of course, while there are plenty of historical records of women serving as resistance fighters throughout history, women aren't exactly known for their fighting roles in World War II as fighters on the front lines. And what does this do for gamers? Well, of course, it breaks the immersion for gamers trying to enjoy a game themed on a real historical world event, and of course it makes absolutely no sense to do this. For instance, counteract this argument, a game like Helldivers has female characters and soldiers on the front line, but of course it's completely different because Helldivers is set in a fictional universe and not a real world event. So it's easy for gamers to suspend their disbelief. Then of course, The Last of Us Part 2. So this was an interesting one. So despite the significant backlash over its explicit focus on diverse characters and themes, perceived of course by many as forced, the game still sold over 20 million copies. So this suggests that while vocal segments of the gaming community may express discontent, there's certainly a substantial audience that simply don't care about this kind of thing, and they were happy to play the long-awaited sequel to its much-loved predecessor. And another example of inclusivity and representation being met on a very positive front was Spider-Man Miles Morales. This game was of course met with widespread acclaim, as many people found the game of course just to be simply fun and engaging. So while the diverse element was celebrated among certain circles of the gaming industry, the fact is that Miles is a character that was first introduced in Ultimate Marvel back in 2011. So for Marvel fans and game fans, this character already existed in the Marvel universe. So having a biracial character of African American and Hispanic lineage didn't break the immersion because he already existed and wasn't replacing or race swapping a pre-existing and loved character. So it made sense, and gamers responded very positively to this because it was a great game. And of course, on this front, there's been many recent controversies. So there's been a lot of pushback from the gaming community towards devs leaning heavily into incorporating ESG as well as DEI practices when making games. And of course, the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy has put a massive spotlight on this apparently secretive side of the gaming industry, and exposed more and more narrative development consultancy firms who are also having public meltdowns and outbursts on social media, such as, of course, Twitter and Reddit, and doing the rounds. So Mark Kern, for instance, many would know him as Grums on Twitter, recently stated in a video about why there is so much forced inclusion in the gaming industry, and it appears mostly driven by access to easy money for game devs, provided they push the message in their games and engage with consultancy firms such as Sweet Baby Inc., Black Girl Gaming, etc.
It's not that gamers are, upset about, oh, hey, we have some diversity in the game. It's actually the way that they go about it, with pure tokenism, with phoning in weak characters instead of creating strong new characters. And more importantly, it's about a vindictiveness to destroy the past, to destroy the IP, to ignore the source material, and to tear apart these beloved characters in some sort of fitful rage that we don't understand and is very disingenuous.
Even more recently, CEO Irina Pereira from Unleashed Games, who is a white woman herself, let's bear that in mind, proudly announced on Twitter that their game Haven has no white males as starting characters in their alpha build. Understandably, this blew up in the gaming community, and many on Twitter called her out for not just being proudly racist, but of course also a hypocrite, considering that of the 6 members in the leadership team, 4 of them are white males. Understandably, this led to a negative reaction, and of course, all social media accounts are now under lock to prevent further distress to the brand. For a team trumpeting diversity, it's pretty ironic to have 5 out of 6 of your leadership team as white and 4 of them male. Then, of course, there's the BBC gaming presenter Jules Hardy, who has called on narrative consultancy firms to end with a final purge of ideological opponents from the medium, specifically those who are critical of oversaturation of DEI within games and the gaming community, so they can get back to the gaming community that they've been creating. Well, recent sales on titles would indicate that the purge is a long way off being anywhere even remotely successful, but at the very least, I've found a song they can listen to which suits their ideologies to a T and should get them motivated to get to work. And to top it all off, the recent Game Developers Conference at Moscone Center in San Francisco, otherwise known as the GDC, really produced some hot topics for the gaming industry. First, this presentation was spotted, telling game devs to end white cisgender able-bodied man as the default. Now look, I understand that games come in many shapes and sizes, but it appears gamers themselves gravitate towards the white male lead by default anyway, depending on the environment and setting the game appears in. So this indicates that these narrative consultancy firms and people pushing ESG and DEI clearly still have no understanding of their target audience, and the fact that gamers generally either want to play as a character appropriate to the setting or make something completely whack for shits and giggles. But that's okay, they can let it all out with a well-deserved session of screaming into the abyss to alleviate their frustrations over gaming's rejecting their message. So with all the controversy and pushback from the gaming community against DEI practices, it's relatively easy for outsiders unfamiliar with the space to assume gamers are simply a bunch of white males, racist bigots, whose sole purpose is to marginalise minorities and stare at depictions of voluptuous 3D women. And sure, there is indeed an element of that. But the far greater audience of gamers simply wants to put on their favourite game, immerse themselves in the world, and enjoy a respite from the political messaging injected into every form of entertainment and social media in today's day and age. Put simply, let us have a space where we can be free of the message being constantly rammed down our collective throats and simply enjoy some of the time spent escaping from the realities of everyday life. Nobody's saying you can't create games with a diverse and representative cast. Just make the game good and don't make the messaging the primary purpose of the game itself. But anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, but keep it respectful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you want to see more of this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.